Welcome to the X Podcast. So good to be with all of our X fam today, wherever you are listening in from, whatever platform you're watching or absorbing this content. We are so glad to have you. I've got my friends with me here today, Russ and Tim. Thank you guys so much for being here.
Hey,
how goes it? Anything new happening in your life?
You got your haircut again.
I did. That's not new.
Oh,
that's
sorry.
every week.
That's every week. Thanks.
You didn't notice my haircut.
I actually did. It looks
did.
so good. So good.
I don't
good.
believe you.
It looks
High
so
fade.
good.
Looks good.
Hey, can I jack this episode already for 2 seconds?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Already.
Hijack it. All right, 2 things.
Yeah.
One, I want to give a shameless plug that if you've not watched it yet, you have got to watch Derek Dalgadio's In and of Itself on
Yes.
Hulu. You will weep. You will thank me. You will feel alive. It will change your life.
Is that the guy from Saved by a Bell who died?
Yes.
No,
That's him.
That's
Screech. No.
Isn't that
That's
his
Dustin
name?
Diamond.
Derek Dalgadio?
No.
And then I got a group
Dustin.
activity last week. I was made fun of
Peppermint
for
bomb.
my peppermint bomb. so we are
I'm
going.
not even gonna be able to think.
Yeah. So
I've got blisters on my hands.
all
Yeah,
right,
I do too.
5
Hold on.
drops.
Five.
Oh,
Five
no.
drops.
I literally have blisters on my hands. Open
Well,
wounds.
that's gonna hurt. Well, I
Can
do
the
too.
camera see them?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Yep. All right.
Do it.
Ah, look at these blisters I got. Oh,
Those are
You said
CrossFit.
5?
Now what?
5. Now, all right. Rub together. All right.
Oh, you're getting
Rub
I
together.
was gonna.
All right.
It's so bad.
Form a nice little tunnel.
Okay.
No.
And let your lungs inhale deeply.
Hold on, I'm late.
No.
Form a tunnel. Ow, my
Wow,
hand.
that's strong.
Do you feel
Ow,
alive?
my hand.
Tell me what you feel. 1 to 10 right now. Explain it.
I feel-
Elaborate.
I feel Christmas.
You feel
I
you
feel
feel
Christmas.
Christmas.
I do.
Okay.
It does. It's like.
I smell like I just walked to the
like
Home
a-
Goods.
Do you feel like that your
smells like
insides
Hobby
just had
Lobby.
a shower?
Woo!
No.
How many times
Shower?
are you supposed to do it?
I feel
Yeah.
clear. There you go. Wow.
Thank you for that.
That is
You're so welcome.
Wow, pure essential oil, peppermint. That's intense.
So-
well, thank you for that gift.
You're
that was
so welcome.
Thank you.
that was awesome. I'm clear. Why are you crying? Why are your eyes
I'm-
watering? Literally,
Because
your
my
eyes
hands
are
hurt
watering.
really bad. I'm pumped about this conversation today.
What conversation?
I don't know. We are. Well, let me pause for a second. If you missed it, last week we talked about all things evil, and so
What? All things evil.
And so go back.
You know, like yoga, stretching, meditating, all things evil. No, that's not what we said.
I went back and listened to it, and
Yeah.
I don't know. I thought it was a really fun conversation,
Yeah,
and
I
I've
did
talked
too.
to people that it's funny when you come across people who you don't think would be interested in learning or hearing or
Yeah.
just hearing our opinion about that type of thing, and I just thought it was cool. And there was a day last week where every week we try to come up with a new topic for the podcast, and most of the time it's me just carrying all of the load.
Oh, yeah.
For the, I'm just kidding.
It's true.
But
Oh my gosh.
you texted us last Friday, this super ominous
Friday morning.
text message. You said, "Guys, I have a topic," and we were like, "Oh, that's awesome. What is it?" And you said, "I'll tell you later."
And then I'm not good at letting things go, so I tracked you down on
You
Sunday
were
right
like,
before you preached.
tell me. So what's interesting is that it came really almost through last week's podcast. So my
Okay.
daughter was listening to last week's podcast. We were at the gym in the morning, and she heard most of it and was down the last 10 minutes. Yeah, I know.
See,
Because if I need to
It's
hit,
life-changing.
woo,
I told
yeah,
you it's life-changing.
Yeah, and so she.
don't rub it.
Okay, that's rude. She was Audrey was listening to the podcast while she's working out. She loves them, and so my daughter Audrey, just so you know, she's a sophomore in high school, and so we were getting ready to head home, and I said, "Well, how much time you have left?" 10 minutes. I said, "You want me to stick it on so you can listen to the last 10 minutes?" And so she said, "Yeah, let's do it." But before you do, so I think something in the podcast really spurred this interest or this conversation. She said, "I need to tell you about a conversation I had this week at school." And I was like, oh, okay, And so if your daughter's ever going to say that I want to tell you about something happened at school, you're going to say,
Absolutely.
I want to hear it. And so she told me about this conversation that we ended up having an incredible conversation from it that I just think would be really relevant for us to talk about. So let me give you the crux of the conversation. She basically said that she's sitting, at lunch table with some of her I'd say lunch friends or people you sit with on a regular basis, and the topic of religion, faith came up. She wasn't bringing it up, but some of the other girls that she sits with and feels like she kind of knows. And then she said she was just shocked by the things that they were saying. Like it just kind of to the point where it just kind of like almost caused just an internal, like she just sensed something, and it was. And so we had a conversation about it. What basically, like one of her friends said was, when they're talking about religion and faith, said, well, I'm studying and I'm reviewing. One of her sisters had told her something and basically said something about Christianity and said, and she kind of said, well, Christianity is not that bad. And so this girl just started, she's like, well, I'm kind of researching whatever I believe. And she said, actually, believe it or not, I was reading about Satanism, and honestly, it's not that bad. In fact, she said that wasn't what got me. It was kind of what she kind of said afterwards. She said, in fact, it's not that. In fact, it's better than Christianity when it comes to morals. And said basically that it's really not bad like you would think. It's really more about yourself. That was kind of the essence of the point. And then the conversation just kind of picked up, and all of our friends kind of jumping in, and one of our other friends kind of said, what do you mean it's not that bad? Christianity's not that bad. Like, don't you know people are getting killed for it all around the world? like it's bad if you would be a Christian because something bad could happen to you. Which is an interesting perspective rather than, well, what about the people who are actually doing the killing of Christians because of that, or anybody of faith because of their faith? And so we got into this conversation where it just made me think about the message of our culture. I guess that's what I wanted to talk about more than anything. The gospel of our culture. What is the good news? What is the message of our culture? And so I proceeded in conversation to talk to her a little bit about what I see. And what she said, I think, was fascinating to me, that it's really not bad and it actually has really good morals, but it's better because it's about yourself. And I couldn't help but just kind of rattled me, because I thought that is the message of our culture today. Everything I think we could say in the messaging of our culture through all forms of media, social media, whatever it is, school, higher learning, really is all about elevating yourself. Yeah. It's really about self-actualization. It's about loving yourself. Yeah. Nothing wrong with that. I'm just saying this is where it's now starting to cross over and I think get a little bit confusing. And then even, self-care. And again, I'm not saying those things are wrong, but what I'm saying, and I told her, I said, you need to understand that is the current of our culture right now. Everything is about be true to yourself. It's about whatever you believe is true. And if that's true, as long as it's not hurting others, again, the morals aspect of what was brought into that conversation. And I just thought how counter that is to the message of Jesus, and maybe how misconstrued people are when it comes to Christianity.
I think there's a lot of conversations within that interaction you had with Audrey. And, first off, I think that for all of the people in a church setting who follow Jesus, we all will find ourselves, if that is somebody, that if you would put yourself in that category, if you're listening, we would all put ourselves, we are going to find ourselves, in a situation where we're going to come against different beliefs and people's perspectives of our faith, of the faith that you've chosen to walk out. And that's going to come, and honestly, it's not a really great feeling at first when you're like, oh, wait, people are saying this about what I've chosen to put my life into. And that's a hard thing. So I think that's a conversation for people who are, how do I exist as a Christian, and how do I share in those environments in a way that one would give the other person a true and accurate picture of what I actually believe. Yeah. And logically, what are they saying that I can propose a counter to, and why? Like, what do I believe when it comes to a response to a thing like Satanism or another religion? I think the second thing I think about is that a lot of people go, oh, Satanism? I'm sure there's not anybody who would follow that. You think things like cannibalism. You think things like this human sacrifice. Like, I think that's what comes to my mind. But honestly, I think that there's people who would ascribe to the gospel or to the religion of culture,
Yeah.
that if they were to honestly look at the tenets of what modern Satanism proves to be, that they would actually look at that doctrine and go, I would say that I believe that more than I believe Christianity doctrine on its face. And so I think that whether or not you would find yourself listening as you would identify yourself as a Satanist, I'm sure we have very few professed Satanists listening on the other end of these microphones. Never know. And if you are, I'm glad you're here. But I think sometimes the deception is that we can be living out those tenets unintentionally because they sound on their face to be good and true.
Yeah.
Taking care of yourself on its face is not a good thing. Being selfish to the point where you care only about yourself and think only about yourself is a bad thing. That's one example. And so I think that there's a lot of conversations that could be pulled out of that conversation that would be helpful to people listening, how to digest the gospel of the culture, the way you put it. I think that was a really good way to say it, and how to really understand what is it that I believe in, and maybe we can lay out the tenets of Christianity.
What do you think? I would love to hear from you, Russ. What do you think is, if you were to try to encapsulate the gospel of our culture? In other words, the message. The word gospel, by the way, means good news. So what is the message coming from all forms of culture? When I say culture, it could be from Hollywood. It could be from celebrities, right? I mean, that's a pretty big voice today through social media influencers, through our government. It can be through, all varieties of, I guess, messaging.
LeBron,
sure. Celebrities, athletes. I mean, they're very vocal now, and that's fine. But what do you see a connection there of self? What do you feel like the message is?
Yeah, I think there is so much there, and I think in a culture as diverse as American that we're living in, there's obviously 1,000 different voices that tell you who to become, how to do life. But I think what's interesting is to back up and say this whole thing on self-focus is nothing new.
Right.
I remember when I first gave my life to Jesus in 7th grade, DC Talk. Only the old school people listening to this will know what I'm talking about. There was this line in one of the songs that said, "The disease of self runs through my veins. It's a cancer to everything I do." And, one of the tenets of Christianity is that
Jesus is
the
still
paradox
all right with me.
of finding life is losing yourself in him. And so I think it manifests differently in every culture. But I do think it's safe to say that our culture is probably seeing a greater manifestation of just absolute unashamed narcissism than perhaps any culture previous. So if you were to try to boil down the million different messages going on in our culture, you could say a couple things. Be you, do you, whatever makes you happy, do that.
live your truth.
Live your truth. So
That's what I mean, the gospel of the culture. These are the messages especially our younger people are hearing.
And calcitrated in this whole thing of self-absorption is universalism.
Yeah.
You talk about do your truth. So those are two different things that kind of marry together, but that could make two different podcasts.
Yeah.
Which is the do all roads lead to Rome.
Yeah.
Right.
Do all are all philosophies equal? Or all? And when you think about that practically, hopefully you take the time to really unpack that. Because the thing is, the Bible says the enemy disguises himself as an angel of light. Like you said, when you look at let's call it selfishness for a second. Just like everything else, it's on a broad spectrum. From what seems harmless to, no, I'm just going to focus on myself, self-care, which there's nothing wrong with that. But there's a difference between self-leadership and self-absorption. But you go all the way from that soft side of the spectrum all the way to Satanism, modern Satanism. Anton LaVey, do whatever is best for you, do what you feel like doing, indulge yourself. You're getting into like the darker side of just unabashed hedonism and narcissism.
Can I add to that though? I don't think it would just, I don't want to just also throw it in the spectrum like, okay, it's Christianity or Satanism, and they're like equal opposing, views. And
No.
we don't, I don't feel that way. But I think also that fits in that same category because there's a version of theistic Satanism, which kind of believes in a darker spiritual force outside of us. Then there's kind of the more generic, I would say, kind of non-theistic version, almost atheistic version of Satanism, which really believes that darkness exists within us. And so it also elevates us to be a place of God. I would say that there's other forms of that atheism. Nuns, that I'd say you put in a category, though they would
When you say nuns, you mean N-O-N-E.
N-O-N-E, sorry,
No
not N-U-N.
religion. Yeah.
Not
Not
the ladies in heaven.
Yeah.
You're not talking about demonic nuns in monasteries.
No, that's, what did you just say? That was,
Sorry.
was that from a movie, or
No,
are you
it just-
calling them demonic?
it just-
That's
no, it
awful.
it just flowed out.
No, so N-O-N-Es, which is actually the fastest growing religious demographic in the United States right now,
Yeah.
is N-O-N-E. Basically, it means people who say, they've gotten to a point where they say, I'm not affiliating with any type of religious belief system. Okay, well, here's what I would say. The benefit of that is that then you get to become the source of truth.
Right.
Right? So it's nice to be able to say, well, I'm not going to take any of those because I just see bad things in it. Listen, there have been a lot of really bad examples of people who have claimed to be Christians over history. A lot of bad things have happened over the years under the name of Jesus that I don't think Jesus wanted anything to do with. Okay?
Right.
There's things that have been bad in the church because of mankind and sin and corruption. I don't deny that. Okay? But I think what we see today is because, and I would say because of the gospel of the culture, the message of the culture, which is about self, and it's about you do you and you live your truth, and you don't let anybody tell you what to do and how you should live and what you should behave, that there's a push away from any type of religion. And I think an atheistic version of Satanism can, in many ways, kind of have an appeal because it's not about worshiping some demon god, some red devil somewhere. No, it's about it's about yourself, and it's about morals. In fact, that was what kind of blew me, because when you look at Satanism, and if I'm not going to say these are the same, but even atheism, there's really no morals. There really doesn't. I mean, there is, because people do have morals, and they feel like in part of society, and all this, that you should be morally good and all that kind of stuff. But if you really boil it down to the fact that there's no God, no creator, we're just, we just kind of came to existence, and we're the highest form of whatever has grown to existence. There really is no one writing moral code. So other than for peace and civility, and you shouldn't want to hurt other people, but where does that come from? Right?
The picture I get in my mind when I think about, and again, it's so hard to talk about the generation when it's so diverse, and there's so many different people and so many different camps, so mmany different categories, so many different ages, so many different generations. But when we talk about things like this sense of even just atheistic Satanism of, well, you be you go for your truth. I almost have the picture in my mind of like this hurricane, and there's like, this may sound weird, but there's like a branch flying in the wind in the hurricane, and somebody's trying to grab onto a branch that's not even attached to a tree.
Yeah.
And I think what you have is you have a society where everything has become so moralistic. I think what you were getting at, because there's moral atheists, there's moral agnostics,
Absolutely.
there's people that
Great
are
people.
There are people that are better atheists than better Christians.
Yeah.
But I think philosophically what you're speaking to is if there's not a baseline for a creator that laid out morality, then morality is relativistic. And so you end up with statements like, your truth, whatever works for you, as if truth wasn't absolute, but it was like a different flavor of the ice cream.
Right.
It was different flavors of ice cream for the week. And so I think when you have two things going on in the society, when you have the land of comparison through social media, you have the addiction technology that you have going on, you have the loneliness, the isolation of an upcoming generation, and then truth seems to be more relative than it's ever been. Yeah. I think what you have is you have people trying to say, what can I latch onto? Yeah. And unfortunately, yourself is a really flimsy thing to latch onto if you were made for something greater.
Yeah.
Because you're not going to be able, I admittedly come from a Jesus follower perspective. And to me, when we talk about whatever you believe, Adam and Eve in the garden, to me, what happened in the garden explains human psychology more than anything else. That's one of the reasons I believe in Christianity. Because what happened was not that Adam and Eve just ate an apple or did something bad, but what happened, what was tragic, is they unplugged from their source. Mm-hmm. They were wrapped in the glory of God. They got their spiritual oxygen, their emotional energy and source from God. And what happened is they were unplugged in that moment. The whole story of Jesus coming is not to try to make people behave or make them good Christians. He said in John 10:10, I've come that you may have life and have it to the full. And the tragedy of any form of narcissism, no matter how well intentioned, is this. It's like, for my phone to have the juice and have the energy, have the power, it has to plug into the source.
Right.
And what I feel like we have a generation trying to plug the phone into the phone, trying to plug themselves into themselves and wondering why the end result is misery.
Yeah.
I think there's so much to unpack, though, and I think that you can honestly go through life for a long time and live a lot of years without having to come face to face with what do I believe. Because I think religion can happen by design, and you can choose your set of morals, your set of standards in life. Like, you have that ability. It either happens by design or you just end up in a certain religion by default. I'm not talking about religion as far as a denomination, but a religion as far as a set of morals and a mindset that you would live your life after and model your life after. And so for me, I never want to live a life that is religion by accident, religion by default.
Right.
And I know it seems a little dramatic. I've got the 7 fundamental tenets of Satanism right in front of me. And I see a lot of these followed by a lot of people that I'm around that wouldn't. I mean, honestly, I see a lot of these that probably a lot of Christians are adhering to. I see a lot of Satanism in the church. Mm-hmm. Would you say that? Is that too dramatic of a statement?
Yes, it's a little dramatic, but I understand what you're saying. I've read the tenets, and I would say that you have to just really be careful, because I believe this is the way Satan works.
Yeah.
I'm not saying he's the one that created Satanism. I'm just saying the way Satan works is that it's deceit. It's kind of like truth wrapped in a lie, or should I say lie wrapped in a little bit of truth.
Yeah.
And there are some things in some of those tenets that it's like on the surface, they sound good. Some of them sound moral. But if you unpack them a little bit, you realize that they're really not that moral, or they're not that good. And or I'll just say this, they're more about propping yourself up, which to me is antithetical to what the Christian faith is. Mm-hmm. Do you want to read a couple of them?
I would love to.
Just read a couple of them, man.
And maybe we can
let's
read
talk about
them
a few.
and we can tease them out. I do think it's important for people to understand that I don't think that people, and I don't think we think that most people are actively professing Satanism over their life.
Right.
You know, and the conversation that your daughter had, it was at a high school lunch table, right? And we understand that.
She wasn't saying that she was. She was just, what grabbed me was the comment is, I'm researching all of faiths, okay? And by the way, Satanism isn't that bad. In fact, I think it's better than Christianity.
Yes.
And like has better morals.
Right.
And it was like, what? And then the comment, well, really, it's, again, I think this was the whole, in the context of, it's not about like some red devil, and we're not just going and do, like you said, human sacrifice and that thing that we picture.
Yeah.
But that it was really more about self.
Yes.
And I said, I told my daughter, I said, that is the deception.
Yeah.
And I said, that is the message of the culture that we're in today. It has nothing to do with, it's not a message of Satanism. That's a message of our culture coming through it.
Maybe what would be helpful, and you guys tell me if this is right or wrong, or you think this is the right approach. Maybe I can read through these tenets one by one, and we can unpack how we see it at work in culture, and we can maybe, I think there's deception from our perspective in each one of these, and why the outcome of a life lived through these tenets would end in destruction or end in a way that maybe you're not intending. And so everybody listening, hopefully you listen to these things, and we're not calling anybody a Satanist. There's things on here that I'd say, wow,
It's not bad.
Am I living my life like this, and are there things I need to address based on who I claim to follow? So first one, you'll understand more as we read. First one should strive to act with compassion and empathy towards all creatures in accordance with reason.
I don't have a problem with that.
I would want, the asterisk is beside
What
in
asterisk?
accordance with reason.
Right.
Yeah, sure.
So what is that? That's what I would want to see teased out, because that.
But we can't read it. So I don't want to read something into it that's not meant to be there as well.
But I think it
But it
was
puts a
meant to be
limit
there, because
it totally puts a limit on compassion.
yeah, it
does
puts
put
a
a limit on
caveat.
empathy.
I would
into
say
it.
that.
Here's
Yeah,
the
I
limit.
agree.
Here's the ceiling.
Yeah.
And so
And the problem,
Within reason, what I mean, does that mean as long as it doesn't dramatically affect you?
see,
there's no subtext. It's
Right.
literally just
That's what I
that
mean.
I just
yeah,
read.
see, the ultimate problem with that, depending on where your faith framework lands you, is I'm so glad knowing me. that God's grace isn't in accordance with reason. I would say His grace towards me is actually unreasonable.
Yes.
And I'm so thankful. It's the cross, the gospel is a scandal because of that.
Yep.
And everything about that scandal is informed my life.
Yep.
And has brought me freedom and has brought me life and has informed how I try to treat others.
Right.
And I think the deception is to limit your compassion towards others is to limit your own level of joy and the extension of your own heart.
Yeah.
Within reason. That's the question. And that is a.
So you seem to have a problem with us reading into this because I have more side with him.
No, I mean,
What
I
is
think,
it?
I don't think we have a problem reading it. If you're going to write a tenet, I can understand. Here's why we'll see that. If you're going to write a tenet and you're going to leave it open like that, then you're leaving it open to interpretation. So again, I don't know in general what is again. I think
But that'd be like if Jesus replied when they asked him, "Well, what's the most important commandment?" He said, "Love the Lord your God with some of your heart."
Right. Or within reason.
determine how much.
Within reason.
No, love the Lord with all your heart within reason.
Within reason.
Within reason, right?
Yeah.
I would say that. I'd say I think what we're trying to do here is point out deception within these from our perspective.
Yeah.
And so, in my experience, I have understood that the most profound encounters in my life with other people, with other humans, people that are closest to me, is when they showed compassion to me or empathy to me when they had every reason not to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right? That's how fights are healed. That's how broken relationships are healed.
Yeah.
You might have every reason to hate your mother. She might have given you plenty of reasons.
Yeah.
But compassion is almost forgiving reason in order to heal something or bring something together.
Yeah.
And I have a problem with I'll read it again. One should strive to act with compassion and empathy towards all creatures in accordance with reason. That's super subjective.
Sure.
Reason to you is different than reason to me.
Yep.
And
Well, I think a lot of the statements are very subjective
yes,
because I've read through them. I think a lot of the statements are really subjective relative to whatever you kind of feel. And I think that is a big question mark. There's no objective source. Nothing
There's no
defines that.
foundation.
There's nothing defines.
There's no basement underneath all these aerial
Yeah.
statements.
Yeah.
but I think that a lot of people live their life this way.
Yeah.
That I'll show compassion and
As long as it
empathy
doesn't-
within reason.
As long
I'm
as it
not
doesn't
gonna
inconvenience
Yeah,
me.
I'm not going to give away all my money.
Yeah.
I'm not going to go move because of that.
Yeah.
I'm not going to forgive that person because they did do wrong.
Yeah.
I'm
So-
not going to amend that.
If we wanted to push in even more, though, on the whole idea of relativism versus absolutism, the question would have to be begged: what is reason, and who decides that?
Right.
Because then, based off that, what is within reason of how you would want to be treated? And what if your value level is different than the person that you're across the table from?
Well, whoever gets to decide what reason is and isn't would be the God of this religion.
Well, no, I would think it would be self. They're saying within
That's
your
what I'm
reason.
saying.
So
Yep.
it is.
Which self
I
becomes
get
God.
To choose
Right.
how much reason, how far I'm going to go with compassion and empathy. And so, what is hard, again, you'll find this, I think, in pretty much a lot of the statements, when there aren't backed up with any source of objective truth or standard. Let's just say standard. In other words, we have a God that we believe that came to earth that actually created a standard for everything. You can look at the Sermon on the Mount and the things that Jesus said. He was like, no, this is the standard. When you don't have that, then it does become very subjective. And so I can make mine really short, but you can't actually say that I'm wrong.
Right.
So again, this is to me. This is not the trickery in Satanism. And again, this is a version. There's some other levels to this, but the trickery in all this is that it is so relative and so much about you and what you want to decide that it's safe, it's benign, and you can never be wrong.
Yeah.
Welcome to the 21st century.
Right.
Welcome to
But without
a
a
postmodern world, right?
Yeah, but if you ever press into it philosophically, it's just a house of cards, though.
Oh, of course.
Right. Number 2, the struggle for justice is ongoing and necessary pursuit that should prevail over laws and institutions.
So there's two things that stand out in my mind. I'll speak to one of them, and then if you have something to say, and I might come back to it.
Okay.
Because I'm just processing. I just looked at them once before. I haven't really. again, I think this is creating a new form of morality by saying laws that are in place, if they impede what you believe is just, that you have the right, based on these tenets of your faith, to usurp those laws.
Yes.
And
It's your responsibility.
to me, that is just code language for anarchy. That is code language for rebelling against authority. Because if I go back and I go, well, I feel like you're treating me, you can go back, it could be at work, right? And we've all been in situations like, well, I feel like the boss or the company is treating me unjustly. They may be following every policy, every rule, maybe it's fair, but you don't think it's fair. And so I'm going to now do whatever I want to do. And so to me, I feel like that one is, it has this nice ring to it at first. Justice is an ongoing fight. Injustice is an ongoing fight. And I think we see lots of injustice in the world. And injustice is something that God speaks to in the Bible. So that's why I said it's kind of shrouded in, well, we should stand up for injustice that's happening. We should come against injustice. I can agree with that. It's when you get to the point where it's like, even to the point where you can usurp laws, and where you do that, again, what you're doing is just removing objectivity, and you're creating, I feel like I just think about what happened January 6th, and I'm not saying it's related to it, but I feel like that it's opening the door for anarchy.
I was about to bring that up because I would say on both political extremes, this might be a commonality between the two. Is this both political extremes would say that my ideology gives me cause to, like you said, usurp the laws in government and institutions that are in place, when I would say the constructive way and the way that would lead to more life-giving is to don't start anarchy or rebellion or revolution, but pursue ways to honor government and join it and participate in it so that you can become an influencer from within.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you guys covered this one, because I think you have two things. One, it is you go back, not to keep harping on the philosophical card, but for there to be justice, there has to be right and wrong, and there has to be
something has to be just.
For there to be common justice, there has to be a common judge. So then you're back to, so then who's the judge, and where does right and wrong come from? And if it's myself, then here's what's interesting is if self connects to even an atheistic form of Satanism, then it reminds me of its cousin, which is the verse that says rebellion is witchcraft. And so when you have self on the throne, the outpouring action is rebellion.
Yes.
Because I decide and I call the shots. And so if something doesn't line up with my sense of justice, and so I just think there's so many implications that somebody that would buy into that needs to think about. How does a world work if everyone
7 billion gods?
If there are 7 billion gods, how does the world work? And I guess the easiest answer is the way it's working right now.
Right.
I think that I just to add real quick, because I'm 100% in agreement. I think we all kind of see through this one. I like what you said, though. I wanted to say we saw evidence of this in our culture over the past 2 months. Because here's what we end up, like you said, the political extremes. And what happens is, right, people on those political extremes feel injustice. You have on, a variety of different things. I will just couple. I don't want to go into politics. I wasn't intending. I'm not.
You were going to talk about
Marjorie
Taylor Greene.
No, I wasn't going to talk about her.
Okay.
But you have these extremes that I think we saw play out and where they go. I guess is what I'm trying to say. One extreme is that there is widespread cheating, widespread corruption in voting. So I am going to usurp the institution and the laws, right? Then you have on the other side, and I'm not saying it is, but when you get to those extremes, you got the other side that would say, you shouldn't be able to tell me how to live my life. And so I'm going to do whatever I want, even if the law tells me otherwise, regarding certain laws, policies, and things like that. So I think it's rooted in rebellion. And I will agree with the one part, but what does it say at the beginning? The pursuit,
The
for
ongoing-
struggle, ongoing
the
struggle,
struggle
I
for
agree that
justice
there is
is
an
ongoing and necessary.
ongoing struggle for justice that we will never see this side of life.
I agree.
That's why I wanted to say. I kind
But
of
even
agree
to
with
say,
that,
like,
that
we're
phrase.
all going to feel injustice.
yeah,
And
absolutely,
we're all going to sense injustice.
and we cause.
And look at how many
Injustice.
people are categorizing, oh, well, you think there's an injustice and you think there's still racism in our country. Well, I'm going to categorize you with an extreme group of people that burn down police
Yeah.
precincts and take
Yep.
over cities.
Yep.
You think that there is inconsistencies with voting and lack of transparency. Well, you are just as good as the people who stormed that Capitol. Both of those statements are false.
Yep.
And I would argue that if you have a heart for people and a love for the government that you're a part of, that you would want both of those things. You would want transparency in voting, and you would want for more transparency. What business, what organization doesn't work hard for more transparency? Why shouldn't our government try their very best to become more transparent? Why not? Why not? Why can we not fight for the rights of every single person, whether they're a woman, whether they're black, whether they're Latino, whatever it is? And why can't we fight for more common ground on both of these things? And why do we have to push people in those extremes? My argument would be maybe if you're engaging in that, then you need to check whether or not any of this deception is in your heart at all.
Yeah.
Because
And the source of justice.
yes.
These are all injustices, everybody says, but again, it goes back on what you said, which in order for there to be injustice, there has to be a judge. There has to be someone who is dictating what is just. And that's the argument politically every 2 years, every 4 years.
Well, you
is
have
what's just, what's not just, and everybody's arguing different sides. But
Yeah, I think about statements like this: if you voted for Trump, you belong in jail. If you voted for Biden, you're socialist.
yeah.
I've
These are
heard both
just-
of those
or you're
things.
not a Christian.
Yeah,
You're not,
right.
there's no
They're
way you can be a
extreme.
Christian and vote for
Right.
Biden. Who makes that decision?
Yeah.
You, because you're God and you get to determine who is and who isn't operating in a certain. It's just when we become the God of our own society. I think that that's an interesting one. Number 3. One's body is inviolable, subject to one's own will alone.
To me, that one just speaks of self. Like, you're not going to control me. I'm not going to let anybody control me.
But what does that really?
I'm not going to let anybody dictate to me what I am going to do and say.
I mean, the first thing that makes me think of is abortion.
Okay. Why?
But I'm just wondering, like, is there anything else that comes to
Well,
mind?
I think of it as an extreme form of hedonism,
Yeah.
which is an extreme blend of hedonism and Epicureanism. Which
Describe that to me, because you might as well have said qigong to me.
Epicureanism is back when the Stoics and the Epicureans would debate. Stoics thought that true life is found through this rigorous moral behavior. It was almost not like Pharisaical, but it was just very moral, austere, serious life was the best kind of life.
Are you saying real words right now?
So picture just really religious, moral people.
Yeah,
They thought that's
legalism.
how you find life. But they weren't necessarily religious.
Yeah.
And then you had this group of Epicureans who felt like that mental pleasure, like mental stimulation, basically picture just a really bougie person who just found all of their joy in their head, that was the path to life. Hedonism is a form of extreme physical indulgence and pleasure, that you do not restrain yourself from any amount of physical pleasure. It's two things. It's the avoidance of pain and the indulgence of pleasure.
So maybe that's
it
another way to
believes-
look at it, is when you think about this, one's body is inviolable, subject to one's will alone, one's own will alone. It's speaking to what people perceive as sin, putting whatever you want to in your body, treating it however you want, any drug, any sort of substance that you can.
Yeah,
put your
I
body
think
as
there's two things you got to think of.
You're right.
Number one, I know this sounds really cheesy, but they used to have this statement. One of the elders at an old church, he was a principal at school, and he had this thing on the board. It's one of those statements that you know is true, but you hate it. He said, you are free to make choices, but you are not free of the consequences of those choices. So I think several red flags that should hit you if you even are tempted to look into that as a way to live life is that, yes, you could do whatever you want to your body, but there are consequences to every decision. There are
Yes.
consequences to the food you put in. There are consequences if you don't wear a seatbelt and you go 100 miles an hour down the road. Like, you could do that today. There's going to be consequences. There's going to be consequences sexually for the way you indulge without any restrictions, any wisdom, any prohibition. Like, everything that you do to your body, sowing and reaping, like, there's going to be a result. Like, input will equal output.
But what's interesting is that you have physical repercussions and emotional repercussions for every one of those things that there's this it's not just one. It's almost always both. And so if you go out and just get sloshed one night, there's emotional repercussions on the back end of that. Like, okay, that was your choice. But you will have not just physical repercussions in a hangover, but you're going to have emotional repercussions as to what you said, didn't say, and who you were with, you know? And I think that, I don't know, I just think it's an interesting...
Even Gandhi said that drunkenness today is sadness tomorrow. Like, everything that you do, like you said, will affect mind, body, and soul. So that's one part. And the second part, again, just because, we admittedly come from a faith background. As a follower of Jesus, I believe that since God created my body, He knows what it was designed for, what it's best for, what's not just best for me, but what's best for me to give out from it.
Yeah.
And so one of the phrases that I love that Paul says that informs the way I personally live my life is he says, I was bought with a price. Then my body belongs to God. And so what's crazy is, again, I believe the search for all of this can come from good intentions. But unfortunately, to get to the best result, I found, is to actually elevate the meaning of what my body means, to believe that it actually has divinity inside of it, and it has divinity that it was intended for.
Yeah.
Because when I honor my body and I think, oh, I was bought with a price, it doesn't demean me or restrict me. It actually liberates me, because I want to put the best fuel in this body to reach the greatest dreams and destiny that I could ever imagine. I want to use my body in such a way of purity that it protects my future, and that it can protect anybody associated with me one day, that it can protect. When I look at myself as bought with the price, those restrictions actually become liberations that actually bring greater meaning, protection, and joy to my life.
What do you have to add? What do you have to add?
Nothing. I mean, I think you guys. I mean, it's.
How are you feeling after the peppermint bomb?
It's great. Okay. I still smell it.
You look a little nauseous.
I think it's.
Just kidding.
I think it's hard because these statements, again, they're so kind of like, I don't know. They're just. It's hard to nail them down. It's hard to know. I feel like most of the tenets and the things, because there's other essence of Satanism, like you get from Antoine LaVey's published Satanic Bible, and it seems like everything was written. So this is what's in the back of my mind. I don't want to project this, but it seems like all the tenets of Satanism are written to specifically contradict Christianity. That's what it feels like. Like when there's statements about Satan that you choose the opposite. Like there was a phrase, I can't remember it now. I had come across it once before. It was just this idea of Satan represents vengeance instead of turning the other cheek. And so again, when I hear statements like that, and that's from the Satanic Bible. And when I hear statements like that, I think you wrote this specifically to combat Christian morals and values, because that's basically, it's like vengeance. Satan is, you get to take vengeance. You're not going to do anything to me. Whereas Jesus said, hey, if someone smacks you on the cheek, turn and give them the other side. Again, these are countercultural concepts.
Counterintuitive.
They're counterintuitive and they're countercultural. I think a lot of this stuff is written so vague, and so that I feel like it's easy for our culture to live these things out without ever professing to be, well, I'm a Satanist, or, you know what I mean? Like, what is this?
Well,
and I think it's for community. I think Satanism and these things exist so that people that want to find community but don't want to find it in a different kind of religious setting can find other people that would share those same kind of values, because I think deep down we're all wired and built for community. And so
I think you're right in a way, and I completely. I think that this exists more in culture than even culture realizes, which is what I think the intention of it is.
Yeah.
You'll have the few, and that would say I'm a Satanist, and those people are like, there's, I think the general public would just kind of okay, that's kind of odd. Let's just move on. But then you have a lot of these principles that seem to be alive and at work in the world, and I think that I'm speaking more to the young person or the person who's never done the digging or just has never thought that they needed to at these things that are at work that are actively, in my opinion, in my view, adding a level of deception, inviting you into something that's ultimately going to end in a way that I don't think you want your life to end.
No,
I don't think you want your life to end in a way that follows the tenet of one's body is inviolable, subject to one's own will. You absolutely have the authority to make whatever choice you want. That actually lines up with Christianity. We have free will. God's given us the ability to choose.
Yep.
But at the end of the day, the concept that you own what you did not create, build, or buy.
Yeah.
Yep.
There is nothing about yourself that you created. Okay, like if I could have chosen my hair, I would have probably chosen different hair. Does that make sense? If I could have chosen
What's wrong with your hair?
to be 5'8", which I'm not, or 6'4", I would have chosen 6'4". But I was given by whatever, but genetics. I was given a certain body that. Yeah, I get that you have the ability. You can choose to do whatever you want, but not every choice is going to lead to the outcome that you'd hope. You might experience temporary, a temporary stimulant and temporary joy and temporary pleasure. I was just reading in my Bible this morning about Ecclesiastes chapter 2, and it was Solomon just talking, the richest man that ever lived, and he was talking about how he would look for the meaning of life, and you can go read it on your own, Ecclesiastes chapter 2. You can go look for the meaning of life, and you can go and engage in every pleasure. He goes, I bought people to be my slaves, male and female, and they had kids in my house, and I had money like you wouldn't believe. I had every possession. Then I thought I'm gonna gain wisdom, and I'm gonna gain wives, and I'm gonna and at the end of the day, all that is worthless. Yeah. And somebody who's been to the mountaintop that we would look at and go, oh my gosh, that's the goal. Yeah. The Jeff Bezos of biblical times. And he would go back and say, nope, God gives all that.
Yeah.
And
that's good.
And all of those earthly things are chasing after the wind. And I don't know.
I think it's good. I think thought on that. But before I say that, or we go down the list, whatever we're going to do, I just want to say, going back to last week's episode, is hopefully one of the things that you hear even beyond what we're saying is the questions that we're asking. That more than even telling you how to think, if you're wrestling through this, ask the questions. When you hear that thing about justice, ask those kind of questions. Well, wait, who decides? Yeah. Well, wait, does that mean, then who's deciding who's right and wrong? Yeah. Well, wait, what are the long-lasting implications of that? Wait, what if everybody lived this? Like, those are the questions you got to think. And what you said, about Solomon, and he tried everything, wisdom, money, women, everything. But at the end of the day, nothing satisfied, even when it may have felt good for a season. There's a really important verse when you're young, but through your whole life that says this: sin has its pleasure for a season. But after that, isn't that the whole, especially when you're young, but your whole life, the whole deception is, but it feels good right now. The people I know are doing this, but they seem to be fine. But then the deception of sin is you see the sparklers, but you don't see the bomb it's attached to. And I think, again, going back to assuming that anybody that's asking these questions is coming from a deep place that, you make fun of me, but I feel deeply. Maybe it's that wing force side of me. But I believe that every human, the questions that they're asking to pursue even this is because there's a deep desire, there's an ache, there is a hunger for what is going to fill me with life. And one of my favorite quotes from C.S. Lewis is he says this. He says, if you find a desire in you that nothing in this world can satisfy, that is your greatest hint that you were made for another world.
Yes.
And so going back to this analogy, self-care is great. There's always, like you said, there's truth wrapped into lies. Self-care is great, but self-focus and self-absorption is misery. And the phone of your life will never be able to find its meaning by plugging into itself. That is why I don't think it's an irony. we talk about like narcissism, and like if you ever study like the nerdy Greek origins of it, is Narcissus, who was the son of a river god, Cephasus, and this nymph, Lipior or whatever, and he rejected love from someone, and the gods cursed him. And then one day Narcissus is looking at his own reflection. He was renowned for his beauty. He's looking at his own reflection in the river, and he's so drawn to his own reflection that he drowns in it. And I don't think we can miss the irony that the generation that's drowning in the deepest levels of narcissism is also simultaneously drowning in the deepest levels of anxiety and depression.
Yes.
Like those two facts are inextricably linked. And so for everyone that is tempted to think, if I just focus on myself more and I just do me, the question that we all have to humbly ask ourselves is, how's that working for us? Because self-care is great. I need to have value for myself, but I need to know where that value comes from. And for me, it comes from Imago Dei, God stamped on the image of me. And I would just say the longer I live, and I'm not live very long, but the longer I've lived, the people I know that are way wiser than me have taught me that life is found in the paradoxes. And so like when Jesus says to find your life, you must lose your life. And Jesus' call is so counterculture to that. He says to pick up your cross daily, deny yourself, not indulge yourself, deny yourself and follow me. But I think what's important to say is that that God's desire for our joy and us doing that are not enemies. I talked about hedonism. I know this is a book, not everybody's crazy about this author, but one of my favorite books of all time that I want to encourage you to read is called Desiring God by John Piper. And the tagline is Meditations of a Christian Hedonist. And the whole argument comes from that old Augustine principle that God is most glorified in us when we are most satisfied in him. And that if you take the roots of our joy and God's glory and you take them down, they actually merge. That there is actually not a distance or an enemy between us living for God, losing ourselves, but us simultaneously actually finding the greatest level of joy, fulfillment, meaning, and peace. That the two aren't enemies. And life is found in the paradoxes. Jesus doesn't tell you to lose yourself. I'm going to quote C.S. Lewis again. C.S. Lewis says, it's when you finally lose yourself in Jesus that you actually become most like who you were always meant to be in the first place. And it's when you lose not who you really are, but you lose the layer of falsehood, of selfishness, of self-absorption that has actually always masked you from finding out who you really were. And it's in Jesus, because he's the one that made you and created you, that you actually have your world expanded and you actually finally plug into the source and the phone gets charged.
I want to start wrapping up. I think,
Sorry.
No, I love it.
That was the final word.
No. And
good.
I want to go through the last four of these tenets eventually. Not right. I'd encourage people to go. I'd encourage people to go to this website, thesatanictemple.com. But I think that the point of elevating self to a point, making yourself the deity of your life and the God of your life, and the deception that can come within that. I really want to emphasize what you said. The sweeping wave of anxiety, depression, suicide.
We're thinking more about self than ever.
Yes.
We're more anxious, depressed. The number of suicide attempts is way up. So wait, this doesn't make sense.
Yes.
Right? How are we living in a culture where now we're all thinking about self-care, self-love, all these different things, and yet that stuff is going up through the roof? It's not working. Yet that's what I was trying to say, is that's the message. That's the good news. The gospel of our culture is love yourself, elevate yourself above. Like, that is the most important thing.
But tell me why.
Why?
That so many people go, well, how in the world could I ever believe in some God in the sky? And how could I ever think that that is a reasonable argument and that is a reasonable religion to follow?
Well, my answer to that...
Maybe that should be part two of why we believe.
Well, my quick answer to that when I was talking with my daughter was, I said, what do you mean some God in the sky? I said, last time I checked, Jesus was a real man that walked on this earth. It was documented what he did, what he said, what he taught. I said, I don't follow some, fictitious deity in the sky that I don't, that's not the way I see it. I follow Jesus, and I follow the words that he taught. I believe in him because of the actions he performed, predicting his death, burial, and resurrection, and then making it happen. These are all some of the reasons why I follow Jesus. So I think one of the challenges in that conversation was how Christianity has been seen by people versus what it really is. And so that's when I told my daughter, I said, honey, you'll never win in trying to convince somebody that Christianity is not these bad things that someone may think they are. I said, there's too much of a black mark, black eye on Christianity, on the church from other people, not even stuff you did or your experience. I said, I point people back to Jesus and what he said and what he did. And I said, I follow this Jesus, and the way he taught was so counter to everything that we've been talking about today. This is where the morals and where it's come. What he said was so counter. Jesus, he said, the whole world will know you're my disciples by how you take care of yourself. Right? That's not what he said. You're looking at me like you thought that's what he said? No. Jesus said, Jesus said.
You haven't gotten a chance to talk that much today, so I'm
Jesus
giving you
said,
space,
yeah,
and you start yelling at me.
No, I'm teasing. No. Jesus
I'm about to ask
said,
Pastor Russ to start talking about hedonism again.
Okay.
Give me some of that peppermint stuff.
Is this a new word for you? But so
I'm just going to start casually talking about hedonism in every conversation.
Okay. Jesus said, he said that the whole world will know you're my disciple by how you love one another. And when I think about what Jesus, when he was asked, like, what is the greatest thing that God wants you to do? What's the greatest command? He said, love God with everything you have, right? Not within reason, but love God with everything you have. And then the second is like it, love your neighbor as yourself. Mm-hmm. What's interesting is, even if you just look at that, what Jesus said, he's including that you should love yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yep.
But then when he said what matters most to God, in God's perspective, the first thing was loving God. The second thing was loving your neighbor.
Mm-hmm.
In the same way that you would love and care for yourself, love and care for someone else. And so what I told her, and we can look at some of those, I just said, you need to understand, if you're going to follow Jesus, you're always going to be standing against a current that we're in a culture, and you're going to be living in something that is going to very soon, it is becoming, if it hasn't already becoming, a minority belief system, especially in America, where, again, it's not like some God in the sky with a bunch of rules and things you can't do, and you want to talk about anti-hedonism, like being a Christian, right? It's the most miserable thing in the world. That's what you're going to get, that perspective. I said, to me, to speak into those moments, to say, wait a minute, I would believe that what Jesus taught was, I want to love you every bit as much as I'm going to love myself. And I want to serve you. And I want to sacrifice, like what you said, what Jesus said. If anyone who wants to follow me, must take up his cross daily, deny himself, take up his cross daily, and follow after me. That it's giving of yourself. It does go. It is so antithetical when you peel back what sounds really good on those tenets. It could not be more opposite, I guess.
And back to the paradoxes, even just practically on that. Proverbs says, he who refreshes another will himself be refreshed.
Yes.
You talk about like self-focus is the quickest recipe to self-misery. But what's the quickest way for a self-pick-me-up? To take eyes off me and encourage someone. That should tell you something about the way that we're wired.
Yeah.
One of the most inspiring sermons I've heard, obviously outside of our church, because the most inspiring sermons I've ever heard is from our church, of course. But as this guy out at Las Vegas, Jabin Chavez, and I'm probably butchering his name, but he preached a message called Give Your Way Out. And it was his way of talking about how he worked through a really hard and lonely season and kind of depressive season in leadership, in church leadership, and how he just felt like God spoke to him in a moment, said, give your way out. That the tendency is to, I'm going to lick my wounds. I'm going to try to take care of myself, and there's certain things that we all should do if you're feeling that way. You should get better sleep. You should eat better food. Yep. You should exercise. You should take care of this gift that you've been given. Did you know that you only have a 1 in 400 trillion chance of becoming a human being in the world? Not million, not billion, 400 trillion. That's the odds of being a human. And so take care of that
Yeah.
and steward that gift that you've been given. Oh my gosh, what a pleasure it is, even though there's things about you that you would like to have changed. There's things about yourself that you don't like, and there's ways and you had wished that you were born into a different family. You wished that something would be different about your childhood. Well, guess what? It's still a huge gift to be a human. And so his message was all about how if I made the decision that if I felt like I had financial lack, that I was going to make a conscious decision to be generous in that moment. I'm going to buy someone's food.
Yeah.
I'm going to give some money away.
Yeah.
I'm going to give my way out. I'm not going to hoard and save and think about that next purchase for me that I need to
That's
make me feel
countercultural,
better.
though.
But I'm going to give it.
Right?
I'm going to give my way out. I don't feel like very encouraged by my workplace. Well, I'm going to make the decision to be the encourager.
Yep. It's good.
And I'm going to get my joy from encouraging people, even though I feel like no one's encouraging me.
Yeah.
That's the countercultural thing you're talking
That's
about.
the gospel.
That's the gospel.
Well, that's the gospel of
good.
Jesus versus the gospel of our culture.
And I tell you what, too, and even speaking to that friends group, of your daughters, would you like to name their names, by the way?
Yeah,
Okay,
sure.
no, just kidding. But what I'd like to say to even people that find themselves in a situation like your daughter, and go, man, I just didn't have the words. I wanted to. I know that there's life and joy and fulfillment on the other side for these people, but they're believing certain things that I know that are going to lead to deception, and sometimes you can feel the guilt of, man, I didn't bring what I know to be true to that conversation, or I wasn't ready. Well, what I'd say is that the life that you live over time to people like that is going to mean much more than any of the
Anything you
words
say.
that you could say.
Yeah.
I love it.
Can I add one last thing because I was thinking about your daughter, and I think three things. I think one, like you said, your life, to live a life that people, and I bet they look at her life more than she realizes.
Oh, yeah.
And there's something so special about your daughter. I would just encourage her if she's watching, like they see a difference. They see the joy in you.
Yeah.
And St. Francis of Assisi, he said this. He said, "Preach the gospel always, and when necessary, use words."
Yeah.
But I will also say, don't let timidity hold you back. I love what Jesus told the disciples. He said, whenever you're worried, because they weren't trained, they never went to seminary, they didn't feel like they were good enough to talk, and Jesus says, the Holy Spirit will give you the words to say.
Yeah.
And I found that when I step out on a limb and trust God, like He will give the words to say. I would just say your life, your words, and then your prayers. Richard Baxter, this old revivalist, he said, men may spurn your appeals and reject your message, but they are helpless against your prayers. And your prayers are some of the most powerful things and the most powerful weapons you could ever have in these moments.
Good. Yeah, I just to wrap up, I first would say I'm super proud of my daughter, because just even in that moment for her to recognize that, and she just, I think it kind of took her back, and there wasn't a long conversation. It was like 2 minutes and the bell was ringing, so she didn't really feel like, well, I could say something. But I think all of us will find ourselves in a place where we're going to hear the message of the culture. We're also, if what you believe, you follow Jesus, is, I think we're moving more toward you're a minority when it comes to a belief. And I feel like you're going to be in a moment where that conversation is going on. What do you do? What do you say in that moment? And I love what you said. Both you guys, your life speaks way more than anything you're going to say in there. I think that what I try to do in those moments is I try to point people back to Jesus. I don't try to defend the practices of a religion through all of its organizational forms and denominations and things that I can't account for. I strip away from that. I just want to get back to Jesus, and I feel like that is, to me, the source of life. And it's and you're gonna be kind of. She said, why do I feel like that I get picked on because of what I believe, yet I would never turn around and hate on somebody else if they did say that they were a Satanist. Or if they did say they were of this, what? She was like, I would never do that. I don't understand why they feel like they can do it to me. And, at the end of the day, I think we just have to understand that if you are a follower of Jesus, you are standing in the middle of a flowing river, a current that is getting stronger and stronger, and you're trying to walk upstream. It's the best picture, right, of following Jesus right now. You're trying to walk upstream. And, I think that the most important thing that I think we can do in those moments is, A, let our testimony really shine through. I think B is, like you said, prayers. Just show your love for people. At the end of the day, the conversation was going on. Even if they've heard things and they're interjecting things, it's like, why would people say this about it? I only hear through her a bunch of young people who are searching.
Yep.
That's what I hear at the end of the day.
Yes.
And I believe that in our culture right now, people are searching.
Yeah.
Yes.
And they want to find what's real. And it's sad to me that what it sounds like is that a lot of people are looking for some type of religious belief system that matches what they want to already believe. And I feel like that's what this is. I feel like that's this conversation. I feel like that's what looking at Satanism and looking at all these other things. I want to find something that matches what I want to believe, not looking for truth that might sit above what I really believe or what culture says and submit to it.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's the difference between Christianity and pretty much all other world religions, which to me is something that we could dissect at some point. There's a huge difference between it. I mean, even look.
Part B for the next conversation is the universe.
Are you going to bring peppermint bombs again?
Have you ever noticed we have part 2 for every single conversation that we have?
We have said that the last 3 times.
We're gonna, so halfway through the year, we're gonna pick up part 2 for every single one of the episodes.
I want to wrap up, but I want to stay in that vein. I want to stay in that moment because I know for a fact there's people who listen to this podcast who don't believe what we profess to believe.
Sure.
And I will tell you with everything inside of me that this past season for me, like just because we work at a church and we're pastors doesn't mean we are exempt from the weight of what's going on in the times right now. And I would say personally it's been one of the hardest seasons emotionally, interpersonally. It's been one of the hardest, darkest seasons of my life. But I would still stand here and tell you today that Jesus, through him, he is the way, the truth, and the life. And that he came to give life and life to the full. And that he has met me in every dark moment. He's met me in every dark time. And I think that I'm going to do this often on this podcast, but I think that maybe you're listening and you're listening to the plans and the purpose and the life that God wants to give you from our perspective. And like, I don't have that. And you hear us talking about how culture wants you to make yourself the God of your own life. But you've felt and understood that you fall short, and that no matter how hard you try, and no matter how hard you try to come back from the things that beat you down, no matter how much you try to do, how much good you try to do in the world, you feel like you are falling short. Well, that's the message of the gospel, is that all have fallen short of the glory of God. And even though we were still sinners, that Christ still died for us, and he died for you, and that there's life and life to the full around the corner for you. And this is not just a place where you can get mental stimulation for conversation, but it's a place where at your lowest, you can send us an email. You can send us an email at podcast@thex.church. You can reach out to us as a church, and we'll have a conversation with you, and we'll walk you through. And that's our heart for you. And if you're listening, we have been praying for you, and that's why we do this. And there's a purpose for you. So that's it for today. Thanks for listening to the X Podcast. We'll be back next week with more.